Welcome to our Burning Questions. I'm Alec, I'm the Technical Manager at Quellfire. In this series of videos, we've been trying to share the different points of view from other members of the construction community. Obviously, as a manufacturer, we just see one small part, but we believe it's the whole collective from design all the way from build and everyone involved in that, and trying to share their points of views will hopefully elevate the construction industry up to the newest standards that are required. So thankfully, I'm joined with John Aitken from Firespec. Thank you very much for joining us today, John.
Thanks for having me.
Just for anyone new, if you can just introduce yourself and the company and just a brief summary of what Firespec does.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. So I'm John Aitken, I'm the founder and CEO of Firespec. We're up in Scotland, although we have a presence all over the United Kingdom. The main thing that we do for most of our clients are main contractor clients or building consultancy clients, even end user and landlord clients. We work for blue chip clients as well. Basically, the main thing that we do is go into building sites during construction. Most of it is during construction, and we inspect for compliance of built-in passive fire protection and structural fire protection systems. We provide consultancy in those areas, so we help build specifiers and main contractors to understand what they should be building, help them through their design coordination stages, and we help them find solutions where they can't find a solution or troubleshoot problems. So that's the consultancy aspect, and most of it otherwise is enforcing specifications, making sure that the installations are according to specification.
I know, thank you, that's great, and it's the reason why I wanted to invite Firespec onto this call today. So I feel you've sort of more have the finger on the pulse than, say, Quellfire as a manufacturer. We do a lot at the design stage, but I think you've got that aspect where you're helping them through that design stage and, more importantly, stick through the build. So what I'll be very keen to get your points of view on is, first of all, I like to start with more the negative end, is what, in the last few years, what sort of other sort of common challenges that you are seeing throughout the people that you're working with and such. So.
Okay, so there's lots of different things going on in the built environment. I think it's fair to say that we haven't learned all of our lessons, so it's fairly common knowledge, I think, that we've got a lot of legacy projects, a lot of where surveyors have gone in and done destructive or type 4 type risk assessments and opening up invasive, intrusive risk assessments, compartmentation surveys, and found a lot of non-compliance. Unfortunately, we've still got a lot of that going on. Those surveys continued. We've still got, on a number of jobs, we're still finding an awful lot of, I would go as far as to say, ignorance. So contractors that have got fire stoppers, particularly we're talking about fire stopping today, so fire stoppers going in and they don't know what they're doing, essentially. So they don't know what they're doing because they haven't been trained properly. They haven't been given a set of tested details to work to. They haven't had workshops. They're not overseen. They haven't got quality managers coming in behind them. They're just literally, sometimes they're hired off an agency, and they're coming in and they've told the agency, oh yeah, I'm a fire stopper, I've been fire stopping for 10 or 15 years, whatever it happens to be. And they'll go in and it's just bat and mastic, bat and mastic, bat and mastic. It's the old in the fire stopping industry, bat and mastic kind of solves everything. And as long as it's got bat and mastic in it, that gives you the answer to all your problems. But it's just, obviously, as we know, with standard tested details and what the test evidence that we've seen, particularly on yourselves on the testing side, it's just not as simple as that. We've got a fire strategy, then you find that you're trying to achieve EI ratings, integrity and insulation ratings of 60 and above. They can be particularly difficult to achieve. Anything 60 and above, even 60 on certain types of details with certain types of products passing through. And it's the misunderstanding or the lack of understanding of how to achieve that and how important that insulation rating is. There's a great lack of understanding on that insulation rating. So I mean, that comes from specifiers right down. We find specifiers don't appreciate what the insulation rating is. They haven't done historically. I think the industry hasn't historically understood what this insulation is and why. And so there's lack of understanding of have we achieved it or haven't we? So I think we find that I provide training to architects and specifiers, main contractors, and the eyes are opened when you explain to them what this insulation rating is and how difficult it can be to achieve. So I think that is ongoing. These problems persist, and I think it's the lack of ability to train everybody at pace. How do we train, the industry overnight? It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen, and I think it's going to take a number of years. We were sort of talking off camera this morning that we both agree. I came up with a term of about a generation. You said funny. We both think it's going to be about a generation before we work this through, before it becomes second nature and everybody's, oh, this is all second nature. We can do this now. So yeah, those things persist. There are so many other problems. I could talk about, design stage, how to design. We find that a lot of the problems we've had, let's go back 5-6 years, where we were starting to work closely with main contractors on inspecting their live buildings. And we'd come in and we'd get invited to come in once all the fire stopping was finished. And we go, no, it's all wrong. Why is it all wrong? Well, you've not allowed for your aperture edge spacing, not allowed for your service spacing, nothing supported, you've got no insulation, with plethora of problems that we would find. So then we step back a bit, we try and help them from an earlier stage. So I think what we're finding is particularly tier 2 contractors down, but some tier 1 contractors as well, where there's a lack of appreciation of that early engagement. Take the golden rules in the design and installation of fire stopping guide. Take that guide. And rule number 1. What's rule number 1? Early engagement. I think the message is still to get through, and again, it may take a number of years yet before it's throughout the industry. But early engagement, you cannot say enough how much the early engagement is vital to compliance. So we're finding that where we're not engaged early enough, and where yourselves are, if the manufacturer, the consultants aren't designed, or even sometimes the fire stopping contractor has not even been consulted early, and they just get given a set of holes with services penetrating through and told to go and fire stop them. And it's like a lot of them buildings, we walk in and go, there's literally nothing you can now do with that. You haven't left enough space between your builder's works and your door heads. You haven't left enough space between your builder's works and your builder's works. Everything's cramped. You've got fire dampers going through the same openings as multiple services, and it's like, guys, you're going to have to rip all your services out and literally reroute things and rebuild your walls before you can get actual compliance to tested details. We're still there on a lot of projects, or where we get asked to come in too late, and it's that just ignorance. So
well, that's actually, it's a good point. So I actually sort of to give credit to Firespec as well, is the fact that obviously you do inspect, but that consultancy thing is quite vital, because I think one of the challenges I see maybe with some inspectors is that they know something's wrong, but they don't necessarily know how to explain it's wrong. And so I think that's where you're right, where you're being brought in early. And we've seen it, and obviously yourself seen it with certain tier 1s and tier 2s, that early engagement from all aspects. We're even talking, you said you're supposed to be inspecting the end project, but you're getting in at earlier stage to consult them to make sure that your inspection just go, we're all on the right. So it's good to see, and I think that's a vital thing, which is why I wanted to talk to you today, was about that aspect that you're seeing it from sort of the design into the build stage. But obviously a few years ago you were just being, can you just come in and tick the box? And I think one of the challenges, I think we talked about it before, is the fact that for some years ago they were resisting that pushback with the, come on, I just need you to sign it type thing. And it's good to see that things are slightly changing. But I agree, the generation thing is one of my big problems is there's a post and pre-Grenfell time. Obviously a lot of people we've lost a lot of knowledge, a lot of people are leaving, a lot of people didn't have the knowledge. We need to get that foundation. It's why, one of the reasons why I've done this podcast is I've learned invaluable stuff from yourself and your colleagues, and obviously we talked about stuff after this that it's helped me develop some stuff to help other main contractors because of the feedback I'm getting from your team as well. So that's good. So talking about other challenges, I mean, PU foam was a big one that we always see on LinkedIn and stuff like that. But is there any sort of areas of passive fire protection in particular that you're still seeing? Sort of, obviously, you've worked with qualifier and service penetrations. We talk a lot more about that and spacings and stuff. But there's still areas that not necessarily qualifier help with that are still problematic that you think are still a bit of a challenge in the industry.
Yeah, beyond, I mean, where it's new build, I suppose you can design. There's if you engage early enough and you talk to the right people and you have the right people on the team for design, I think there's always every chance that you can design a compliant solution almost throughout.
Yeah.
Where we still do have a problem, and I think there are going to be problems going on because of the change in the built environment that we're finding post-COVID, is that we're finding that a lot of buildings are going to be repurposed, and
Yes.
there's a gradual slowdown in building of certainly speculative office buildings, and there's talk of and there's already starting to repurpose some office buildings into residential buildings and that kind of thing. So where these were, let's say, all concrete construction and the walls are fairly defined. We've just finished working on one just recently, and there was certain things that there was nothing they could do. It's a refurb.
Yeah.
We're working on a number of refurbishment projects where they stripped back to bare and gone back in, and I think there's certain aspects there where, well, that's the opening you've got, that's the space we've got to work with, and there's just literally nothing you can do with it. And it's like, guys, we can't sign off on that.
Yeah.
We can't, and all you can do is write in your report, this is the best fit, or this is the nearest you're going to get to a compliant solution. We know it's not tested. Going down that line a little further, there's that regulation deemed to comply. It's not really a regulation. In my mind, it's an interpretation of a very, very loose regulation where it's deemed to comply. So if you haven't changed the fabric of the building, then it was compliant at the time when it was first built, right? Okay, it was compliant the first time it was built, and now because you've done a whole bunch of things, but you've not altered the fabric of the building, so if you can't get a compliant solution, don't worry about it, because it was deemed to comply 20 years ago when it was first built. I just think that regulation is absolutely horrible. I find far too many people trying to rely on that. It's not a regulation as far as I can see it. It's a very, very loose interpretation of some regulation. So that's a problem. So I think a lot around the refurb and that loose regulation, and then leading on to the wider problem of untested details, where it's physically not possible to test. For example, beams, cellular beams at wall heads, or beams passing through walls. There's not a test for it. I mean, cellular beams where there's no boxing, there's no test for cellular beams in encasement details. That's not something you would worry about. But where beams penetrate through a wall, you physically can't test that because there's no loaded beam test, and walls, it's a hybrid of two tests. Yeah. So we can't test it. So it's a bit of, okay, the best minds in the industry are working on it, and there's best practice and there's best possible solutions, but these are untested. So there's a lot of risk assessment required, I think, and curtain walling systems and cavity barrier solutions, for various curtain walls, that kind of thing. There's so many scenarios, underfloor, raised access floor situations. There's so many things that are still untested to this day, and almost a lack of an appetite for the industry to get on and test them, or for the professional bodies to prioritise these things, because we have this obsession with untested details, or having to have a tested detail, and it's that disparity between, does it have to be tested, does it not? There's still a lack of clarity in some of these areas, I think. So these are still some of the challenges, I think, all around there.
It's a good point, actually. I'm glad you said that, because it is the challenge where, as a manufacturer, we have the appetite to test, but it's the appetite of no one's given us the the guidance, and when we've talked about this separately, that we're beholden to the BSEN standards a lot of the time, and that needs so many different countries to sign off it. Updates, I mean, the standard I worked to, mostly part 3, was 2009 to 2021. It took that and nearly 12 years to update, and it's still, I would say, outdated, and it's not up to standard. So yeah, it's definitely one of the challenges sees. And I think a big problem I find, and you might find it differently, is people focused on certain areas, which rightfully so, like Grenfell, the cladding and Regulation 7 and external walls and fire doors are always big in the news, and something visible that everyone sees from, and I'm pretty sure most people living in a block understand there's a door, fire door, but don't understand about other passive fire protection. So I don't know if one of the other challenges, remedial is definitely a big challenge, but I didn't know if maybe, are you finding you're being asked a lot more, now people are starting to get more knowledge, are they starting to ask you more questions, and are they accepting that, like we've talked about plastic pipes and cables, and every penetration should need a seal, for example. Are you finding that people are becoming more aware of it's quite a complex topic as such? So
absolutely,
yeah.
And I mean, even I've learned an awful lot in the last 5-6 years. It's about how much I say even I should be a little more humble, but having been around the industry nearly 30 years, I've learned more in the last 5 years than ever before, probably in the previous 25, certainly around surface penetration sealing systems. That's how much the industry has changed, and I think yes, probably Grenfell has put the greatest focus on it. Previously, I mean, there's some old sayings around, like, with incandescent paint, if it's white, it's right. That's an old sort of. So it maybe wasn't so much a saying, but the way that we used to do fire stopping back in the day in the 1990s, if it's 1 hour, it's 1 bat. If it's 2 hours, it's 2 bats. I mean, it was as simple as that. And you take it back to that simplicity and the way everyone thought they were doing it right, and nobody was working from tested details, or very, very, very few people were working from. They might have been working from standard details. But even back then, it was like, what's that based on? And the
product data sheets, probably more than
product data sheets, more exactly. But yeah, I think to answer your question, there is a lot more people. It's getting more complicated because the more people get to know, the more minutiae, the more we focus in and put the spotlight on and the microscope on. Literally every other month there's somebody coming out with a new complexity or level of issue that we've got to try and overcome, and so I think it's a complex landscape, and what I do also find is where there's a lot of information passing around, there's also misinformation passing around.
Yes,
there's people giving their idea of what they think is right, and somebody picks that up as gospel. And then we're turning up and we've been told this and we did this because that. Oh, well, who told you that? And what was that based on? And it's some fire stopper has read something and thought that that was right and has misinterpreted it or not appreciated the whole picture. So it gets ever more complex. And I think the other thing about that then is frustration. I think there are a lot of main contractors, and most main contractors, they absolutely just want to do the right thing. Most companies, they've got a sense of duty to get everything right, if not absolutely to the end user and to save lives, but also to their own organisations. There's a sense that we've got to get this right for a plethora of reasons. But they don't know where to turn because they're getting told one thing from the manufacturers or one thing from the fire stopping companies, and they bring in a consultant and we've been told different. So I think that there's frustration until everything becomes clear. And again, I think there's a lot of dust up in the air and a lot of it needs to just settle and just everything to become very, very clear till we work our way through it.
No, I agree. Actually, I like that analogy. So if I steal it, don't.
No, that's all right.
But I think that's why. Again, I like. Obviously, we've talked quite separately, and again, it's we work indirectly with each other. We work on many projects, but I think what's important, and I think what's clear is that one of the challenges was, like you said, they're just getting information from maybe one source, and it's important, I think, that they verify some of these things, and because not necessarily the guidelines can be ambiguous or out there. So, just listening to a fire stopper who want to get paid is not necessarily that impartial. I'm not saying they are going to pull the wool over your eyes or anything like that, but having your teams that are not only inspecting but consultancy, and you try to learn as much as you can and understand and point people in the right direction. So are you finding that the projects, say, that you weren't part of, like main contractors projects before that you weren't part of, are you finding that they've seen huge improvements since they've been sort of doing that early engagement, getting yourselves in, so that impartiality is there because you're a third party checking another party? And that's why, as a manufacturer, I get asked a lot about, sent a photo, is this been installed correctly? And I'm like, well, I'm not an inspector. I can only advise that they should have followed my steps, but I'm not on site. I've not done the destructive testing, and as an impartial person, I can't guarantee I'm impartial because that person's paid for my products or qualifies products as such. So are you finding that you're seeing that companies are reaping the benefits of getting that third party sort of inspection and clarification side of thing?
Yeah, I think absolutely. So our biggest clients, we tend to work on an awful lot of their building sites, either across the country or certainly big portions of the country. We work regionally with a number of tier one contractors, and where we've seen the best return for our information that we've given and help that we've given is where these tier one contractors are taking it very seriously. They're pulling all the stops out. They've gone to the extent of training their guys top to bottom. I mean, I'm talking from their supervisors right through project managers, project directors, and including commercial staff. In fact, commercial staff are very important. QSs are placing the orders. There's an awful lot of liability on them for placing orders, making sure that there's an awful lot of checks go into placing that order. Are these contractors, are they suitably qualified? Are they third-party accredited installers? Are they able to demonstrate good quality control processes, that kind of thing? So where the hard work's gone in, and especially where these contractors have learned to engage early. I'm talking some of our biggest clients on some of the teams we've worked for in the last 4 or 5 projects of theirs. They now literally, they're talking to us before they've even secured a project.
Yeah.
They're in preferred bidder stage.
Yeah.
And I don't mean we're in competitive tender, like they know they're going to come to us. As soon as they've got sight of that contract, they're like, right, there's what we want you to price, and then they'll give us an order before a spade is stuck in the ground.
Yeah.
So we're going to come to consult on your fire stopping, which is getting installed around your surface penetrations 2 years from now, but they want us engaged because they want to start designing so early, because they know that it's a long process and things, to get to that compliance stage.
Yeah.
So absolutely, where we've seen the best return is where the earliest engagement, and then because as I've come to realise, the only way to ensure you've got 100% compliance is when you design it right. You've got to have a compliant design before you can sign off on a compliant tested detail. Even then, it's some of the problems that exist still are passing down that information down the line. We spend all this time in the workshops, get it absolutely down to, and then it doesn't always get passed down to the guy that's installing the services at the end of the day, or the site team that's managing it. So there's still a bit to do there, but absolutely where the early engagement, and particularly designing right, is happening, then we've got by far the greatest level of compliance out there on the park.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it's good, and I agree that some of the ones the challenge now is that from design to the build stage, making sure it follows through all the way, filters down, because I've been it with main contractors where everyone, you're right, they always want to do the right thing, but the information isn't filtering down. One of the things I wanted to sort of highlight, and again, we're starting to move into the more positive side of things, is we've talked about this before. The discussion here is. One of my challenges, but I want to leave you the positive as well with it, is the reliance on third-party certification, which I think is a vital tool. Like as a manufacturer, we're third-party certified differently for our products. Now, when it comes to fire stopping, especially around certain applications, an installer installers company is third party certified, and that's where I think it's great that their company is dedicated to doing that. I think going back to one of your earlier points is some of these can then use agency workers, and that's why I think your company, as just one example, is vital for that third party overview of the actual individual, and that not necessarily individual, you're not checking every individual, but you're checking the work as well as to make sure that they are, it's toeing the line. So I said, are you still finding that a challenge? That's like, I think you already said that people are heavily reliant on fire stoppers just because they have the third party accreditation, which the company is great, but we still see problem after problem with the installs. So are you finding that when you are inspecting certain, are they taking on board what you're saying and in learning as well, or are you finding you're getting pushback where they don't want you involved as much, or maybe a bit of both probably?
Yeah. There is a mix. I mean, obviously every site's unique, and every individual that we come across on site is unique. Still, sometimes we have to deliver bad news at the first time out of inspection. Where it turns good is they listen to that news, and it's early enough. We start inspecting at the builder's works phase before the first fix M&E goes through, usually, and then we'll maybe come again to check the distribution of the services going through the builder's works. So as long as that level's going through, we can always pick up really early, oh, that's going to be a problem, oh, clash there, oh, that's not right, and oh, it's not, that's the problem, just fix that. So yes, where we're in early enough, where there's enough emphasis on those early inspections before any fire stop, and usually we're 2 or 3 visits into our regime and into our inspection regime before the fire stoppers are even installing the fire stopping. And where that happens, then usually there's a fantastic return. All our guys are trained to make sure that through a rigid process of exactly what needs to go in the design process. The builder's work needs to be right, the service distribution needs to be right. This is how to get a good compliant install. We would usually always ask to do some destructive testing. You've touched on destructive testing. It's really important that we engage with the project managers and their clients, say, look, we need to do some destructive testing, because fire stopping looks good when you finish it. You can put the masking tape round, and so it's all nice and solid and white, and then we'll look at that nice black high pressure mastic. But when you open up, sometimes we find non-compliant. So where all of those things align, and we're allowed to do our job properly, and people do listen, and not saying we're the ultimate authority and everything, but usually, we're pretty good at getting things, as long as we know what it is, as long as we've been engaged early, where we know what the solution needs to be, we know exactly what to look for, and then where the line is towed, shall we say, then it usually works out well.
I've said I've seen it, and that's again the whole purpose of this discussion is I like to show that it's not, I mean, we're different companies, we see it from different angles, but we're seeing the benefits of the same sort of methods and that. And it's one of the big words. I know last year a big word was competency, which is a vital thing. And obviously, like you said, I think the only way to have a fully compliant project is to design it before building and follow these steps. But one of the words that I was trying to push this year, and I think echoes what you're saying about how this is going to be a generation till we sort out thing, is trying to push collaboration a lot more, which is why we're doing this. And I think from a manufacturer, we've pushed ourselves to collaborate more with people that are not necessarily in our bubble, but to engage or just feel like we're all part of one team. So are you finding that collaboration is from the projects, and I think you already have sort of mentioned it, is working quite well for you?
Yeah, I think absolutely, and again, that repeat, the trust is built with your repeat clients, where we've demonstrated, a lot of non-compliance in the past. They've seen the fruits of that painful process of gradually engaging earlier and earlier, and we've come through a lot of non-compliance to get to finally we're starting to get a lot of compliant projects, and we're starting to see a lot of good installs, and everything's just about right, and everybody's, you're working with the same teams, of the supply chain are the same. So what we've found now is we're collaborating, to use your word, with fire stopping companies. We've got I don't mean we command respect, but we've got the respect
Yeah,
of
yeah.
people have got, oh, you know exactly what you're talking about. We don't want to get that wrong again, and we're all collaborating from an early stage. So we're working well with the installation companies who are working with their main contractor clients, and the ones that collaborate. It's a great word. The main contractors love it because all they want to do is build compliant projects. They want no hassle on site. Whereas in the past, we may have been seen as a company that comes along and hits people with a big stick and marks people out of 10. Nope, this is all 2 out of 10 and get that sorted, and it's all wrong. There has been a perception that we're just out there to trash everything. Absolutely not. All we've tried to do all along is always protect our main contractor clients and their clients and the people that are going to live and work in their buildings. So definitely we are getting there now where the main contractors love what we do. They've seen the benefit of having us on board, and although that's cost a lot of pain and on previous projects, they're now seeing that, gosh, to get on with the subcontractors listen to us, that they're here frequently enough and early enough to sort any minor issues, and any bad ones have gradually been flushed out or weeded out of the process, certainly on the main contractor clients that we work with regularly. So that frequency and repeat and trust building and regularity.
It's good. It's why I like to start with the negative and work to the positive, because I think, again, I would use collaboration, but one of the things I wanted to point out is there are, you've looked at LinkedIn and other things, all you see is negative, pink phone, all this competency. But we are getting it right in places, and we're building that, and hopefully, like I said, in 10 years, 15 years, we'll look back and go, well, what were we all worried about? It's easy, it's pretty standard. And so, no, I think that collaboration, I think one of the positives is the fact that you've seen that. And I think, sort of tying in what you just said there, one of the things I think is vital is the fact, especially with sellers, you're not just inspecting your consultancy, it's important to give them the why. So you're not just, like I said, you're not there just to whack on the head. You're like, I'm not being difficult, this is non-compliant because of this, and this is what you need to look to do. And I think the more we can explain to people why it's not just like computer says no, it's computer says no, but it's for this reason. Like I brought this up. Obviously, when we've had discussion, is like first service reports are quite vital, but you'll get the argument from a sprinkler manufacturer saying, well, they say 1 meter spacing. Okay, that's fine, but the test standard states it has to be this distance or closer. Our evidence says this, it has to be this. And once you explain that to them, they go, okay, I get it now. But before, they just think, we said no, or people, why? So that's where I find you're being quite good, and obviously we've talked about things, and again, that's why I've put stuff on my drawings or taken feedback and changed things, because I take for granted that people know certain things, and probably the same vice versa, and it's trying to find out what knowledge people need, what levels, and collaboration, feedback, and I've like I said, I've appreciated the stuff we've already done and we will do moving forward. So one of the other positive things, if you sort of seen it, is going back to the sort of knowledge side of things. Do you think that there is an appetite for, like, are you seeing an appetite for people to learn and stuff? Obviously, I know your team have done sort of level 3 passive fire protection like myself. Are you finding others are doing that? Like you mentioned training there before the architects, and that, are you finding that they're engaging with that side of things as well?
Absolutely. And I think we were talking about Grenfell earlier today, and the publication of the final public inquiry report, and I think if fear does anything good, people are scared of getting it wrong going forward. So there's that aspect, and also the aspect of where there's been so much legacy and so much cost and trouble to get things put right in the past. That's been a good thing in that respect, because people they've gone through pain, they don't want to go through that pain again. I think that it's mostly all positive looking forward. Everybody seems generally positive when they get over their frustration about, do we have to, and the small frustrations of getting things right, where there's been an oversight or whatever. Generally speaking, everybody's very positive about why we have to get it right going forward to protect, our children or the people that are going to be living in these high-rise buildings. Everybody's on board with it now that they've seen the devastation that getting it wrong can cause. So I'm generally very positive about the future.
Yeah.
I'm very happy about the way things are going. I think just the level of inquiries and you almost can't cope at times. Those who know me know how busy we are and how busy I am. Just because that level of compliance is, everybody needs it and everybody wants it, and just one of the few things we have a problem with is actually hiring enough good people.
Yeah, so I was going to say
it's happening.
That's my next thing. So
Go ahead.
yeah, I was going to say one of the challenges, I suppose, go back and we're trying to obviously stay positive is the fact that people are asking so much that we are, myself and I know you yourself, getting kind of overwhelmed with the amount of inquiries, which is great because people are asking those questions. They want to learn, but it's trying to find the right people, because there is, I suppose, and moving on, one of the things I was going to ask you about is what do you think still needs to be done? And I think that is the thing of, we need to try and get the knowledge base built up in the industry as well, because we'd love to hire, I'd like to have, if I could have 20 people on my team, advice, but it's making sure you've got the right person, because one slip up nowadays can cause things. So, so with that in mind, we're talking about training. Do you think there's enough being done to sort of bridge that knowledge gap out there at the moment, or do you think there's still improvement, or like what's your views moving forward? How do you think we should progress?
I think there's been some good positive steps in people like the ASFP and the IFE promoting some great training programs, and there's been a lot of education has gone on. But reflecting on the last couple of years, one of the things I've been saying is that I think that we could do with a bigger, more rounded, I would put the word apprenticeship on there, a modern fire stopping or passive fire protection apprenticeship. And I know that the SFP have had a similar thought. I was approached years ago to help consult on this, and I think the vision was there. It still hasn't been realised yet. I think those that are going to go out and install these products should have a good, broad, but I mean deep and thorough knowledge, a theoretical knowledge, before they put that into practice, and then lots of practice, and the practice needs to go with the understanding of how do the tested details work, why are they working, that proper quality control of carrying over a tested detail onto site and having it available. Now that we're starting to see fire stoppers carrying fire stopping details with them on certain projects we're working on, it's absolutely fantastic. But that needs to be broadened, that knowledge base, and I think, as I say, rounded into, I think there's room for a modern apprenticeship. We've had elementary or early stage conversations with likes of CITB, and we know that they're looking at something as well. They need to be looking for something. So I think lots of different bodies are looking at the right kinds of things, and I think there's definitely work to be done in training, and a lot of work to be done. So again, it could take a generation before the young ones come in, but we need to attract some of the young ones coming into the industry as well. That come in and get into fire protection as a trade. It needs to become recognised as a proper trade, whereas in the past it's just been a sort of add-on and an afterthought. It needs to be recognised as a proper trade, and then properly regulated. We've made a few steps towards regulating it properly with the accreditation, third-party accreditation, and then third-party inspection, making sure that accreditation is seen through. But that all goes hand in hand with the education, so that I think trade apprentices, that all needs to come in the future.
I definitely agree. I think that a good point actually, that bit where you're saying, because it just reminds me where it's saying it needs to be more recognised as a skilled trade and promoted, because I remember actually a few years ago, mind you, probably back in 2020, when a dry liner explained to me that the people that did the fire stopping was the ones that couldn't do the nice plastering. And like putting the plasterboard nice, so they used to stick them on. You do all the fire stopping and stuff like that. So it was seen as, like I said, that afterthought of like it's not really a concern. So no, I think the education. I think also you obviously mentioned that you're talking to architects and like that. I've said it long ago that we need to get out of this bubble of like I go to a lot of fire events and you always speak to the same people, which is good because you're sharing that knowledge. But you know, it's why I like events like London Build and other things. Is I'm then able to talk to architects, MEP designers, people that fire is not necessarily their bread and butter, or you know, they're in the past they think it's slopey shoulders. It's the fire stopper installer's concern. Is I think it's good that architects are taking more involvement, especially. I made this joke before that when you have CPDs, it was always over sandwiches at lunchtime. They weren't really paying attention and stuff like that. But seeing more people doing it in their own time, sitting there asking questions, MEPs and others are coming through. So yeah, I think education will be a big thing, and I hope I was an apprentice, not in fire stopping, but in the career I had before it, and it benefited me hugely. So I think apprenticeships are the way forward, and hopefully it moves forward. So that's definitely one thing. I think another sort of thing you touched on briefly earlier is sort of tier 2 or not necessarily tier 1s. Do you think that they need to sort of maybe how do you think they can improve? Do you think they need to look up more to the tier 1s and say we need to do it these ways? And unfortunately it might be a bit of a headache at first, but it's what they need to do.
I think it would be great. I mean, but what separates the tier 1s from the tier 2s and the sort of developer builder scenario as well, where you've got companies just getting, you know, financed and they're just throwing guys in that don't really know what to do, and they just there's a lot of that going around as well. I think one of the things that would help with that, and it's easy for me to say, like we're already too busy, but I think so. For example, the robust details for sound. For acoustics, you have to have robust details if you're going to build, or if you build to robust details, there's a whole system there. But part of the robust detail system is that you have to have mandatory inspections by the robust details people. So I think that one of the things that needs to come, and I think it's more or less implied, it hasn't become regulation yet, but I think it needs to become regulation, that there needs to be an independent third party inspecting and enforcing fire stopping and structural fire protection, at least on the higher risk buildings. I think that will come as an extension of the new Fire Safety Act, the Building Safety Act. I think that's going to happen under the Building Safety Act, but that also, as we were talking earlier, I think the Building Safety Act is going to get extended to less risky buildings where currently it's 18 metres, 7 stories and above for residential. I think that needs to be extended. Obviously it needs to get time to bed in, and that needs to happen. But I think if we got mandatory inspections, that would force an increased level of competency, assurance, care, diligence. Because the Building Safety Act talks about SCEB, doesn't it? Skills, knowledge, experience and behaviour. Hopefully the way it's going to work is that the Building Safety Regulator won't allow, that's that first safety net, isn't it? The Building Safety Regulator is going to catch those that don't have the relevant skills, knowledge and experience and the right behaviour. So hopefully a lot of the tier 2s and these developer builders will get caught out trying to build higher rise buildings, and they will never get through Gateway 2 because they won't be able to demonstrate how they've got that experience and how they're able to employ all of the functional aspects of the building and regulations. They have to be able to do that now under the Building Safety Act. So if they can't do that, then hopefully that will weed them out. So the Building Safety Act is a wonderful thing, as long as it's seen through and regulated to the same consistent level. The trouble with that is, you know, you've got a whole bunch of new registered building control approvers. I'm sure an awful lot of them are coming from a huge background in building control and what have you. Let's hope that they're consistent.
Yeah,
We need that consistency so that none slip through the net. But so a combination of these things, I think, will force the quality up.
Yeah.
So bring it on, Building Safety Act.
Yeah, and I know it's a good point, that Building Safety Act. Again, I think the people that maybe people watching this, that I agree with you. I think at the moment it's a foundation level of let's get it right at this level, then it will spread out. And I think anyone that's in the belief that there are people that are literally trying to come under the height threshold and do things in that way to try and bypass and find loopholes. And I think
bring the height down.
Yeah, I think people need to realise that they're gonna get dragged into it. So start now. And one of the things I try to point out to people is the fact that we all, both me and yourself, we learn each day. We're learning new things. That's why we talk. And I think people need to realise that people there are people willing to give that information out there. And obviously there are far and few of us, which is why we're becoming so busy. But people need to realise we joked about this. I don't believe there's anyone that can know everything for passive protection. You know, there's so much that I do a small fraction, and obviously you have to overlook a few things. But even as yourself, that's why you'll go and check things, or you need those people to give you the information so you know what to look at, because I couldn't tell you every regulation, every rules and stuff like that. So no, hopefully it is moving forward. I think the Building Safety Act is positive. I know there's a lot of kickback and a lot of fuss. I know, especially from the building control inspector side of things, because there was that new regulation and all that type of thing brought in for that side of things. But no, I think it's a positive step forward, and I am seeing the benefits. I think there is a lot moving forward, and I think there's still going to be a lot moving forward, and I'm glad that we get to share this conversation, and I'm sure we'll have plenty more conversations in the future as well. So just one, I thought, final point is obviously anyone that is obviously liked what's been talked about here, and obviously from John, he's talks about how they can do the inspection, the consultancy and the early engagement. We jump on it, so obviously you can see Firespec company here. I will say, obviously I know John is quite busy as well, so please bear with him and bear with us as well, because we are flat out, but we are both willing to help as much as we can, and I appreciate your time, John. So thank you very much for joining me today. As always, with our episodes, our contact details will come up on the side. You can reach out to us. If there is any questions you want to put in the comments, I can get them across. Any questions you can send to John. But thank you once again for joining us, and take care.
Thank you. Thanks, Alec.